Maybe.
Welcome to Church Without Walls. I'm John, and this is
Poe.
with the new haircut and on the day before school starts.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Are you psyched up?
Meh. I don't want to do math.
Yeah, math is I almost said a bad word. Today we're going to answer a viewer
On
question.
Sunday.
Today we're going to answer a viewer question. I thought it was a great question, and I was thinking about it, and it was a complicated answer because it came to me. Is that Caspian?
Yeah.
It came to me in a direct message, and I didn't really want to type this out. I just kind of wanted to answer it like if I was in person with this person. So, William, thank you for your question. What inspires you to help people? So we're going to come back with the answer to that right after this. All right, I have to be honest with you to start. I'm just going to address you, William, and people can tag along for this answer. Unfortunately, sometimes there's times I don't help people. Now, there are times where you don't help people that might be a positive thing, but I'm talking about a negative thing right now. There are times that I wished I would have acted and I didn't. A number of those times growing up, I wish I was present as a Christian. This is a general thing, but there have been personal ones too with, one-on-one kind of situations. But when I look back on my life as a Christian, I think I was tremendously absent and absent-minded during the whole AIDS crisis. I think the church could have reached out to those who were affected by that, and instead of shunning them and like quoting Romans 1, I think we could have showed up with love, as Christians have done in the past during crises like that, and brought glory to the Lord. So let me just start with the idea that I don't know what inspired your question, but maybe you're under the impression that I am very helpful to people, or you're just curious as to what inspires me to help others. And I gotta be honest with you, I gotta start right away with the thing that says I've missed many opportunities, and I think those are the things that we end up regretting in life, when we miss an opportunity to reach out and actually help somebody. So let's start there, because if there's anybody listening that feels that I wasn't there for them, I don't want you to think that you're still unseen or unheard. I get it. And the truth is, I haven't been there for people who are dear to me in the past. And so I want to start with that because I'm not Mother Teresa. I'm not. However, this question really prompted me to think, because it is a complicated answer, and I want to give you the different perspectives on it. First of all, let's start with the Sunday school perspective. What inspires you to help others? I think as a Christian, I'd like the right answer to be that the love of Christ compels me, as Paul famously wrote, that the love of Christ compels him to action, that is his main inspiration. Now, a lot of Christians might know that answer. You might be surprised to find out how few would suggest that that's their answer. But that's the Sunday school answer. That's the one that we'd all want to say if we were being interviewed by Larry King or something, that it's the love of Christ that compels me to do what I do. And I will say to you that at times that's true. Jesus Christ, to me, I'm a great admirer. Sometimes I even tremble at the idea of calling myself a Christian, or even a Christ follower or a disciple, because I'm not good at it. I do think I've met people that are good at it, but I am much more aware of the whole bearing his name in vain thing. It's the very reason I don't have an ichthus or a Jesus sticker on the back of my car, because I think there are times where my driving acumen is less than glorious or generous, and I don't want to bring shame on the name of my Lord because I'm in. How do you clean up a-hole? Because I'm an a-hole sometimes behind the wheel. Anyway, what a start, huh? So let me start with some other personal stuff that I want to get out of the way, and then I'll try and answer your question accurately, or at least authentically. I was not aware that I have what you would call at the Starbucks pathological empathy, right? You can't find that in a DSM manual. As a matter of fact, if you look it up, it might be called hyperempathy syndrome, or any number of another names. It's this idea that you feel too much what others are feeling, right?
Basically, he cries during the Barbie movie. And every other movie.
One of the characteristics of hyperempathy syndrome is you really feel, or you're in touch with what others are feeling, whether it is their body language, or you could read their face, or their emotions, or what they're going through, and you actually do put yourself sometimes so much in their shoes that you do feel the pain, and it becomes overwhelming. Now, finding this out after being a pastor for 20 years explains a lot. If you don't know that you have this kind of relationship or this syndrome, it could lead to what is called compassion fatigue and other things. So I am grateful that I found this out kind of like on my way out of the church. But Wendy and Peyton would be right. They are probably shocked that sometimes they'll look at me during a commercial and I'm in tears. A commercial can make me cry. Wendy, I think, first realized this when we were watching a Star Trek movie and the death of Spock between the glass with Kirk. I mean, I'm bawling at this silly movie. And yes, Peyton turned to me yesterday during the Barbie movie, and there's a line, I don't want to ruin this from you, but where there's a line where I think it's Rhea Perlman, as the creator of Barbie, says to Barbie the line about what a mother does. A mother stands still sometimes just so her daughter can look back and see how far she's come. That one got to me, right? And so sometimes I help people because I think I'm genetically disposed, and that also would suggest to you that some people are not genetically disposed, or have relationships with empathy that seem lacking. And I've come to understand that there are people in the world, whether you call them sociopath or psychopath, there are some people in the world that just don't feel empathy. And they end up either as CEOs of Fortune 100 companies, or serial killers, or just somebody you dated in college, right? I'm aware of that now. It's kind of scary, but I think both extremes can be bad. For example, one bad thing about hyper empathy syndrome is you're a mark for con men. You're an easy mark. You're an easy touch. You're a sucker for a story, right? And so when you start to realize this about yourself, there's a tendency where you want to just isolate yourself, because you feel it's a vulnerability and it makes you weak and it exposes you. And you really have to grow when you go through this, because you don't want to do that. It's not in your nature to want to hide in a basement and not have any personal relationships because you don't want to be taken advantage of. But if you ever are one of those people who answers that Nigerian email from a prince that you didn't know was an old uncle, rich uncle of yours that wants to give you money or whatever, once you've been harmed in that way, you are gun shy. You've touched the stove and it burned your hand, and there's this tendency to pull back, and you don't feel right about that, and you feel you're missing opportunities. So you do have to become acutely aware and use discernment about who legitimately can use help. And most of the time, that's probably 90% of the people you come into contact with. I don't know what percentage there is of con men or manipulative people or sociopaths who are trying to take advantage of you, but I know that it happens and they're out there, and you just have to become better, more skilled at possibly having a filter on who you're going to help and so forth. And so I have to throw that out there. That's on the table. So we have the good part that Christ does compel me, because I look at Jesus Christ and I see the man that I'd like to be. I also see the great chasm there is between myself and Christ. But I love how Jesus conducted his life, how he reached out to the marginalized, how he confronted the self-righteous. I love where I see his compassion most of the time, and how he reserved his anger just for those in power who were, who really didn't feel, who didn't act in the spirit of what Christ was holding dear, and they responded by the letter, the very self-righteous, the very strict, the very unkind. So yeah, I do look to Jesus, and Jesus has compelled me to act in the past. But to be completely honest with you, it's others. For example, growing up, my mother and father would tell us stories, oftentimes of relatives who acted generously and just had a magnanimous nature. One of those people was my Uncle Eddie, who I never met. Uncle Eddie was a self-made man. He was a real estate developer in the city of Chicago. He almost built a dome for the Cubs back in the 60s. So he was a pretty successful guy. He died young. Two out of three of my mother's brothers died young. So my uncles died before I had a chance to know them. And Eddie was one of them. But my mother would talk of Eddie in such glowing terms, and she'd say, it was her big brother, and she'd say, Eddie he'd fall out with somebody. For some reason, she didn't declare fault. You know how this happens in life, where, you might have a disagreement with somebody and doors are closed and people walk away angry or something, or there's just, who knows, maybe there's feelings of envy or jealousy, or somebody perceives that you've mistreated them and they go away. And my mom would say, a year later, 3 years later, Eddie would get a phone call from this person who actually needed help and was reaching out to him. And he'd answer the phone like it was his best friend. He'd say, "Oh, hey, Hank. Yeah, great to hear from you. How can I help you?" And he'd be willing to help. In other words, Eddie was that guy. He was that guy. He didn't hold a grudge. He didn't wish ill on people who maybe didn't find him attractive or celebrate his own specialness. But Eddie was that guy who was open. If he could help, he'd be there, right? And no matter what, he didn't hold grudges. And so my mom would tell me that story. Man, I wanted to be Uncle Eddie growing up. I still want to be Uncle Eddie. I want to be that guy on the phone who, if I receive a phone call from somebody, let's say from my old church or somebody who said bad things about me, I don't want to hold the grudge. I want to be able to say, "What can I do for you, friend?" And I think Eddie inspired me, and I never met him. But the story, my mother's respect, my mother is another person who inspires me. Giant of a person. She's one of the few Christians I've ever met, right, who is worthy of that title, probably. And so my mother is inspiring to me, and she'd tell me all these little things that probably every mother tells their children, but she'd say, the worst thing you can do in the world is hurt another human being. She'd say, be very careful with your words. Especially her sons are talented, articulate speech. I don't sound articulate right now, but we had the Ben Franklin syndrome. We could wield our tongue as a sword. And she'd say, be very careful what you say to people, because your words don't have a string attached to them. You can't pull them back. Once they're out, they can cause all kinds of damage, and that damage could resonate and echo throughout that person's soul for years. You can't have it back. So she'd say life is too short, but what Mom meant by life is too short is not YOLO. Not, eat, drink, and be happy, for tomorrow we die. But life is too short to allow petty things to interfere with relationships. And that's when she'd use it. That's the context she'd say, John, life is too short, when I'd be venting about somebody who was dead to me. This person's dead to me, Mom, because of that. John, life is too short. And then I'd see Uncle Eddie, and I'd see my mom's admiration for her older brother, and I wanted that. And so oftentimes, my inspiration to help others, I'd like to say, is Jesus Christ or some passages in the Bible and something high like that. But often, it's much more simple. It's Uncle Eddie, it's my mom, it's my brothers, my siblings who have been, my brothers and my sister who have been, I should show, I'm ignoring you, sorry. I should show your work, your watercolor today. Let me take a drink. You're working in watercolor. Nice. I like that. So anyway, inspiration to help usually is people I admire. That's the number one thing. And it might not be somebody I know, like my brother or my sister or my mother, even my father, or my children inspire me. As well. I've learned from Connor and from Peyton and from our dear departed Carter, especially. Carter, I believe, also had this hyper empathy syndrome. Carter, as a person who lived with pain, also was acutely aware of others who were going through that. I think my mother had that. My mother was painfully shy, and yet when she was first in Moody Church, she looked around at this, what was a big church at the time. We didn't call it a mega church, but it was a big church in the city of Chicago. And she looked around and she saw a lot of lonely people who were there just like her, who no one talked to, no one noticed. They'd come in and out where no one shook their hand or even talked to them. And really, I believe it was the Spirit of the Lord that rested on her at one point on one Sunday morning, where she said, I'm tired of waiting for others to reach out to these people. Maybe God wants me to do it. And this painfully shy person became that friendly voice, became the friendly smiling face, became the person who would walk up to the stranger and offer her hand and try and find out about them and make them feel at home and welcome. And not just in church, everywhere she went, that was Mom, right? And I admire that, because that's not me. That doesn't come natural to me. But I admire that, and so it's things like that. But I was about to tell you that it might not necessarily even be people people that you've grown up around, that you watch and that you admire do it. It might be somebody you don't know. It might be a character from a book that you admire. I actually think it's admiration that gives us inspiration. It's people that we admire and we want to emulate. We say, wow, that's special and that's unique. Because to be honest with you, kindness is a rare commodity, especially in the lives we live today that are so, divided by politics and really politics. It's mostly politics that divides people, and it makes them feel like there's white hats and black hats, and like if you don't think like me, you're what's wrong with this country and what's wrong with this world, and you're evil or wicked, and it's really you see that kindness is a rare commodity, and Jesus said, so you love your own, whip-de-doo. I mean, even the wicked people love their own. And I see a lot, especially in Christian circles or in the church, that there's a love for our own. But if you're outside, our circle, we're skeptical, we're cynical, we're slanderous, and we place blame on the others. And I think that's a real danger. But there is this sense where you can find reason, inspiration to help others by characters that you've become acquainted with, whether in real life or in fantasy and fiction, or possibly reading a biography of somebody who's been dead hundreds of years. So it's if you try to figure this out on your own, or maybe you're asking the question, why am I not helpful to people? Maybe you've got something lingering. You've got some pain in the past that has affected you. I've known people who, as a young child, were attacked by a cruel dog or a mean dog. And now they still carry that with them, so much so that the friendliest little pooch, little purse pooch, triggers them, and they just lose it. They can't be in the same presence of any dog. And if that has happened to you, if you've been burned in the past by trying to reach out and help somebody, if you've been a mark of some sociopath, or you've been around dysfunctional people that take advantage of people that are helpful or that are vulnerable, I get it. You might be thinking, wow, I can't stick my neck out. And you might have to work some of this out, either with a therapist or maybe with yourself on your own. Maybe pick up a book or watch some TED Talks or YouTube video and start your path to recovery and healing. If you're looking for inspiration to help others, you can find it. I happen to be passionate about Jesus Christ, but faith has been a great inspiration. I just watched something, my Christian friends might wince at this, but I just watched something that a man who grew up in Nigeria, his life was changed by Muslim missionaries who gave him a sense of peace in a chaotic setting and helped him get education and so forth. And prisoners find this with faith in prison, and they've lived a chaotic life and oftentimes a cruel and a wicked life until they come into touch with faith. So faith can be an inspiration to helping others. I mean, now, don't get me wrong. I know faith can be very caustic as well and toxic. I'm not excusing it. And yet, the beauty, there is true and good and beauty in faith and in certain religious texts and religious experiences. I personally think Jesus Christ is non-pareil. I think he's special. I think that's why his story still resonates. Whether you think it's a legend or history, there's something about Jesus, right? And in the stories, especially in his words, in the way he could confront injustice and so forth. Anyway, so inspiration to help others. Oh, are you done? Because I'm almost done. No?
Keep going.
Well, I'm almost done.
I know, I'm almost done.
Oh, okay. Just giving you a heads up. But if I had to answer the question simply, I said all that to say this. I think the greatest inspiration for me to help other people is the example that others have set in my life, whether it be people that I've become acquainted with through literature or through the silver screen. We've all seen that character in movies, Shawshank Redemption is one of those movies that carries a lot of weight with people because they admire certain characters in that movie, and they find inspiration there. It's we Homo sapiens, human beings, are a people of the story. There's something biologically built into us where stories inspire us, wherever they come from. And that, I think, can be harnessed as a good thing. And that's when you could see a stranger reach out. Now, some people will say that evolutionarily speaking, that biologically we are a group. We have it biologically within natural selection, to be altruistic, because that actually is the most fitting space to be in. That's better for the whole species. That's above my pay grade. I'm not dismissing that. All I know is from personal experience, stories about Uncle Eddie. They don't haunt me, they inspire me. But when I do make a wrong choice, when I am hard-hearted, when I hold a grudge on that phone call that I pick up, or where my first inclination is to dismiss somebody, Uncle Eddie's there, my mother's there, I hear her words, and I think that's a good thing. And the same is true for Jesus. So my answer to you is, under the best circumstances, what inspires me to help others is these people that I admire, from Jesus to my mother to my daughter, to fictional characters like Atticus Finch, right, from To Kill a Mockingbird. There are even characters who you might find inspiration from that might not necessarily be the protagonist, right, depending on how good the writing is. Peyton loves A Bronx Tale, and Sonny is a mob boss, and yet Sonny had certain attributes. Yeah, Sonny had certain attributes, see, that are worth taking note of and maybe even adopting. There were certain things about Sonny, whether it was wasted talent in the end or not. In other words, take every opportunity to glean what is good. A gold digger goes into a river, right? And he pans for gold. And he might be there for hours or days or months before something sparkles in that pan. And a lot of worthless stuff passes through it. And in a sense, our soul has to be that way. We take in a lot of garbage, but if we sift it, we might find something worth keeping, something worth holding on to. And I think everything should be managed in that way, including what Christians revere as the Holy Bible. There is stuff in the Holy Bible that should pass through your pan. And then there's the gold that you might want to highlight, you might want to memorize, you might want to have that verse come to you in times of challenge and of need. You want that to be your inspiration in times of distress or crisis. You want that to be on your mind. And so you memorize it, or you write it down, you carry it in your purse or your wallet. And so that's my answer. Sometimes I haven't been there to help people, and it might have been psychological at the time, or it might have been just something selfish in me. When I have been there to help people, it's not been me. It's been the inspiration of people I admire. It's challenging me to be the man that I want to become. That's it. What do you got, Poe? Which one do you want me to go to here? This?
Either one.
All right, I'm there. So what are you going to do?
I guess I'll show you.
Okay.
It's nothing special. I just did lines and then I blended them together. Just thought it was pretty. And
you've been watching John Lurie, who's a famous watercolor painter, but I don't see any John Lurie in this. This is all Poe, right?
Yeah.
I like it. Thanks.
I did different stripes. See, I did stripe of
Oh.
yellow and then orange and then green and then blue.
Yeah.
And then I used
Yeah.
waters to mesh them.
Hey, before we tune off and say goodbye to people, do you want to give them your review or your impression of the Barbie movie? Did you
It
like it?
could have been funnier. It wasn't that funny. It was mostly just pink, but I liked it.
It was mostly just pink. You know what? I thought it had a... Oh, I spilled.
Yeah.
You're right. I thought it had a great message. But I, too, thought with Will Ferrell and what's her name? Kate McKinnon, I think they could have used them more on the humor side. But very worth seeing. Very worth seeing. All right, folks. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week. Hopefully.
Mm-hmm.